war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
We, the people, tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. The man is not free unless government is limited. An informed patriotism is what we want. But still watch closely. And don't be afraid to see what you see.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
When in hell are all you people going to wake up?
Moretti Underground, the Liberty Report.
Hey, hello America. Welcome to Moretti Underground, the Liberty Report. Today's Monday, April 13th, 2015, and it's 8 p.m. on the East Coast. We're broadcasting live from the studios of PRN Radio Network. That's the exclusive home of the Watchmen of America program. Hello, Watchmen. I'm Joanne Moretti. My great co-host, Scott Fararello, is here with me, too, and we're happy you tuned in. Thank you very much. Our chat rooms at Blog Talk Radio and right here at PRN are open for you. Some of our awesome colleagues, like Lynn, Anna, and AstroTurf, are in the chats putting the links, documents, and articles that we'll be reporting on into the chats as a convenience for you. They're fantastic researchers, journalists, analysts, and please say hello to them when you get into the chats. You may also run into several of our correspondents in there as well, so, try to get along, I guess. Today, we have a huge investigation that we've been working on, and we want to share it with you. Actually, this is an exclusive. It started out, pretty innocently, and it snowballed into something that has me alarmed, and I'm sure when we're done with this segment, you too will be saying, wow, at how big and widespread the issue is. Before we begin, though, I must first do our short disclaimer, and that's just to let everyone know that what is said on this show is my responsibility and not that of the network or our sponsors, the Watchmen of America. The disclaimer goes like this. The comments made by hosts and or guest hosts or phone callers of the PRN Radio Network do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints, ideology, beliefs, or anything else, actually, of members of the Watchmen of America program or the Patriot Resistance website, either in past, present, and even future broadcasts. All right, well, now that that's out of the way, without further ado here, let me open up the microphone for my great co-host, Scott, and please welcome him. He's our all-around audio, video, and production guy, too. So, hello, Scott.
Hey, how you doing, Joanne?
Very good, Scott. How you doing tonight? You ready for this? You ready for this investigation? We're going to lay it out here, man. I'm really, really concerned. I think I'm going to have the house armor plated by the time we're done with this. Before we start on the investigation, though, there's just two little short things that I want to bring up. First, and because of the situation what this is, I think that this person gets top billing. A Fort Campbell medic was killed in an insider attack, and 8 other U.S. soldiers were wounded in Afghanistan. Sue Raybon over at the Military Community Examiner says, just hours ago, the Department of Defense announced the death of a soldier who was supporting Operation Freedom Sentinel in Afghanistan. Yesterday's Army Times indicated 8 other U.S. soldiers were injured in the attack that took the life of Specialist John M. Dawson. He was only 22 years old, of Whitensville, Massachusetts. SPC Dawson died April 8th in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, of wounds suffered when he was attacked by small arms fire while he was on an escort mission. Information released to the press indicates the soldier was a victim of an insider attack. The gunman was killed in the firefight. So Dawson's death was the first reported U.S. combat loss of 2015. He wasn't married. He survived by his parents. So that man gets top billing. Godspeed, soldier. Another insider attack. We're over there trying to help. You know, we're teaching these guys, training these guys, and, you know, first thing they do is turn the gun on him. A 22-year-old kid is dead, and 8 other U.S. soldiers are wounded. Nice job, Obama. And speaking of Obama, the second story is Obama was doing a Gunji crawl last few days over the weekend, and he was at Kingston, Jamaica at the Bob Marley Museum. I found out that when you go to the museum, they give you a free joint, by the way. I don't know if he took it, but I just heard that that's what they... Yeah, well, you know, one of his staff did. Anyhow, you know, he had Susan Rice with him, and he had... a whole bunch of other people with him, but they were doing a Gunji crawl. After he left Kingston, Jamaica, he went to Panama City. All right, so we got some Jamaica gold, man. We got some Panama red, man. Well, anyhow, while he was in Panama City, he's attending this Summit of the Americas. And the first thing he does, even in Panama, I mean, those people like us. But even in Panama, of course, he had to throw rocks at the Americans again. Center for Western Journalism says, one could say Obama has a knack for shaming the United States. He implied America is a racist country while in India, criticized Christians on Easter, after hundreds of Christians were beheaded by ISIS, and is often critical of Israel. Most recently, Obama acknowledged America's failure on human rights, calling them dark chapters in our history. He says, I am a student of history. I don't know when he got to be that. So I tend to actually be familiar with many of these episodes that have been mentioned, Obama said to the communist leaders at the Summit of the Americas in Panama City. I'm the first one to acknowledge that America's application to concern around human rights has not always been consistent. And I'm certainly mindful that there are dark chapters in our own history in which we have not always observed the principles and ideals upon which the country was founded. You know, I'm going to stop right there because I'm going to gag if I read any further. All right, I'm tired of this guy bashing us around the world. You know, he was meeting with Castro in Panama. Castro, you know, I know he says we're going to normalize relations with Cuba and all that. Well, what does that do for the Cuban people? That does everything for the communist dictator and nothing for the Cuban people. He hasn't done anything as far as human rights for them, and the Castros even come out and said Cuba's going to stay communist, and we're not going to stop being friends with Iran and Russia and all that. You know, so what does normalizing relationships mean? And then he told them, well, you know, fights that happened before I was born aren't really relevant. Well, he's the first one to bring up the Crusades and Jim Crow, though. Those happened before he was born, too. I guess those are relevant to our historian-in-chief now, his history student-in-chief. He's a student of history. You know, he hasn't graduated yet. But all he does is run around the world bashing us. So I'm a little tired of that.
That's what he's good at. That and hanging around low-life dictators and commie scumbags.
Yeah, well, he seems to only like communist dictators. He wants to reach out, resets with Russia and, you know, hooking up with Cuba and talking to the Iranians. Even if they're Muslims, they're still communist dictators.
Yeah, see, well, they're not really communists, but they're scumbags.
Yeah, well, they still run it like a communism, a dictatorship and everything else. Those are the only people he respects. Christians he's not real fond of. Jews he's not real fond of. He's not very fond of any American. It doesn't matter what the denomination is for them.
That's because you feel better when you're around people like you, you know?
Well, I'm a little tired of getting bashed by this guy. He's done nothing but upset us divide us and freak everybody out. You know, and now he's running around the country doing a gungy crawl, talking trash about us again. You know, put down the
That's what he
weed,
does
buddy.
best.
Yeah, well, you know, put down the joint.
He even said something.
Start having a little
Even said
self-respect.
something about being in Jamaica. He said he's going to try not to get too high with all the things going on in the world.
Yeah, he's going to try
See
not
that
to
one?
get too high. You know, I didn't see that one, but that sounds like a wink, wink, and a nod to me. All right, let's do this investigation. My heart is fluttering here. All the information I want to lay on you. All right, I want to start the segment, and I want to give you an outline and a refresher on a small piece we did last month. I hope you all remember I wrote a report about an event that came up on a recent trip to D.C. concerning a young man who was a recent Muslim convert and how he got to be a Muslim convert. You know, I was kind of concerned then. Well, that's where the story began, and since then there's been an eerily similar event that took place a couple of days ago in Kansas. I promise I'm going to tie it all in, and I'm going to try to do it in easy-to-understand conversation. I'm not going to bore you all with endless reading, and, you know, we're going to have to listen to a few written points that are directly relevant, though, so don't glaze over on me. All right, so here goes. Here's where the investigation begins, and it found me. I didn't find it, which is even more coincidental. You know, I went up to visit family and do some sightseeing, and this landed in my lap. All right, I'm going to refresh you on the story first. I wrote, it's just a small article, I wrote, Job Corps needs a closer look. I posted it on March 12th. I wrote, I'm writing to give you all a heads up on a situation at Job Corps, Baltimore/D.C. I recently visited family in the D.C. area. One of their neighborhood friends, named Bradley, was brought up in conversation. Bradley's a recent convert to Islam. I had the opportunity to meet this young man. Bradley had just turned 18 years old. He has documented mental illness issues that have to, you keep that in mind too. But I've got to tell you something else too. The kid was incredibly bright beyond his years. I mean, he was articulate. He had an immense vocabulary. The thing about Bradley, though, is he hears voices. The voices told him once to punch his mother in the face, so he did. He had been having problems in school as well, so the school referred him to this group called Job Corps. That's a federal program designed to help at-risk youth finish high school or learn a trade. One of the professors at Job Corps is an imam named Youssef. We've done more investigation on Youssef. Youssef is actually a first name, not his last name, and we're going to get to that. His name is Youssef Salim, S-A-L-E-E-M. Bradley became close to Imam Youssef and subsequently converted to Islam. When I spoke to Bradley, like I said, he was exceptionally smart. He told me he had been an admirer of Hitler. And then he went on to tell me many facts about Hitler. Trust me, he was well-versed. His facts were very correct. Bradley told me he moved on from Hitler, and he began following the KKK. Again, he rattled off a long slew of facts about the KKK, and again, every one of his facts was correct. Now, Bradley has found Islam. He was very excited this day because he was choosing his Islamic name. He chose the name Bakir Ahmed. This time he went on a long diatribe about Islam. He quoted the Quran verbatim, word for word. I mean, the kid memorized the Quran. Now, Bradley's grandmother is outraged at his conversion, but his parents are liberals who are happy that he had found structure. You know, this kid went from being a rotten kid and punching out his mother and getting in trouble in school. All of a sudden, he's a nice boy. He's acting respectable. He's doing his lessons. The grandmother is a Christian. The kid is Irish and Indian, like from India, Indian, not Native American. You know, his parents, like I said, they're very liberal. But the grandmother's a Christian, and she was really outraged at his conversion. The parents are happy that he found structure. Like I said, you know, he was this rotten kid. All of a sudden, he's a nice kid. Anyhow, think about this for a second. This is the type of kid that could be easily led. Now, I just told you he, followed Hitler, and then he followed the KKK. Now he's following Islam. He hears voices. He's been in and out of the hospital, too, for his mental issues. Anyhow, he would provide great cover. Think about it. If he were to carry out an event, there is documented evidence that the kid has mental issues. And like I said, he's been hospitalized for those issues, too. So it could be easily blown off as, if he pulled off like an incident, they would say, oh, yeah, it was a lone wolf, and he had mental issues, and, in the meantime, it's anything but a lone wolf thing. Bradley also told me that many of his classmates at Job Corps are also either converted or in process of conversion. Anyhow, I took a picture of the kid to have, but I wrote Job Corps needs a closer look. So that's where we're going to begin this article, this investigation. The other day in Topeka, Kansas, there was an incident. There were two young men arrested. One of them was named John T. Booker. He's also known as Mohammed Abdullah Hassan. He was arrested as part of a lengthy FBI investigation, and federal authorities, said that he was arrested near the Army base in Manhattan, Kansas. Anyhow, he was completing his final preparations to detonate a bomb, which had in fact been rendered inert, because while he was under surveillance, while this kid was planning his bomb and stuff, the FBI had gotten a heads up on him, and they were watching the kid. As a matter of fact, the FBI brought this kid to another imam. Now, the kid is a black kid. His name is John T. Booker. He wasn't a Muslim. They brought him to Job Corps and wanted him counseled by an imam there. There's the connection right here. When we first saw this kid, Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, right, when we looked at his linked page, the very first thing you see there is Flint Hills Job Corps. And he was in the Security and Protective Services from 2012 to 2013. The kid's 20 years old. He's another young man with issues. Okay, now they tell us that the kid was on medicine and then he was off medicine. This imam that they brought him to, his name is Imam Omar Hazim. Well, he's the imam of the Islamic Center of Topeka. He's the Islamic advisor to the Kansas Department of Corrections, and he served in that position since 1990. It says here, Hazim accepted Islam in 1962 under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Do you all know who Elijah Muhammad is? He's one of the founders of the Nation of Islam and the New Black Panthers. Anyhow, this guy studied under him. He served as a minister for Elijah Muhammad's son, Minister Nathaniel Muhammad. Afterward, he served directly for Elijah Muhammad as a minister. He's been a student of Imam W. Dean Muhammad since 1975. This guy, Amim Haziz, he's a builder by trade, and he's helped to establish many mosques and Islamic centers in the Kansas City and Topeka area. He's been doing it for 47 years. He's also one of the founders of the Islamic Center of Topeka. He's a member of the Midland Islamic Council. He's a member of the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA. Remember that, ISNA, because that's going to come up in this investigation a couple of times. I was also a member of the American Society of Muslims. He gets money from CARE. He gets money from ISNA. Let's see here. He's the director for Interfaith of Topeka Incorporated for 7 years. He's also been associated with Interfaith for many, many other years. He's the author of a book. All right, now, this, hold on, I'm getting it backwards here. I got my things out of order. This mosque, okay, he is one of the founders of the mosque with 4 families. Good thing I memorized all this stuff. He wrote this story about how when he and his brothers first built this mosque, that this family of 4 guys came to his town. Now, he was trying to get $60,000, and he was praying, and he was saying, thank you, Allah, for sending us the money. It says that he got a visit from these 4 guys, and they liked what they saw. So they gave him a check for $100,000. He never saw them before, and he never saw them again. Who gets a check for $100,000? That you don't have to report it because they're a 501c3 and they are a clergy, so they are tax exempt. But, as his story goes on, he says how he's getting money from all over the place, and each time he gets money, he puts it back into the community, he builds another mosque, and all kinds of things like that. Now, Also, like I said, the feds had brought this kid, Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, also known as John Booker, to this imam. There was another kid that was arrested with him, a 28-year-old. His name is Alexander Blair, and they charged him with failing to report Booker's plan to the authorities. All right, anyhow, as the story goes, Hazim said that the FBI told him in early 2014 that Booker had suffered from bipolar disorder, characterized by unusual mood swings. Sound familiar? Hazim said Booker told him days before his arrest that he had stopped taking his medication because it was expensive. The imam added that most people who see Booker recognize that there are some mental problems with him. Still sound familiar? The criminal complaint against Booker said he told an FBI informant in October that he clashed with other mosque members over supporting extremist groups. Hazim said he never heard Booker express any support for violent extremist groups. So now the FBI is saying the kid was violent. The imam is saying he isn't. Anyhow, Hazim said he received an anonymous call about 2 months ago about Facebook posts from Booker, again speaking about becoming a martyr in jihad. Now this is the part I want you to hear. The imam stopped giving Booker rides to the center and work, but Booker he continued to attend prayers and activities at the center. The imam says, I had a sense of him drifting, and I had seen him just drifting into space, and he would have a real deep grin on his face like he was thinking of something that would make him laugh. All right, so now you got the imam saying that the kid is crazy, and what got me on this story was that the imam, was giving this young man rides to the center and to work, and he knew of him, his medicines, and he knew that he had stopped, taking his medicines. Well, as it goes on, it says here the imam said he stopped giving him rides. And like I said, that means he was giving him rides. So the story goes on, and he says about this other kid now, the 28-year-old, that the 28-year-old only started coming around the mosque 2 months before. And the imam didn't know this 28-year-old, Alexander Blair. But he knew that he knew Booker. Well, how did he know that? Excuse me. Or how did he not know that the kid, he knew that they had a relationship. But you're telling me you give this kid a ride to work every day. You give a kid a ride to a mosque every day. You know his medical schedule. You got to know his friends. So I'm not buying that this Alexander E. Blair was a stranger to this imam. He knew damn well who he was. So he was either a Fed. Anyhow, the story that the Feds is saying is that this kid, Booker, had all the Facebook posts, and he said he wanted to be a martyr, and they did bring him to the imam to have counseling. I don't know when that became the Fed's job, or if this imam is in on it and some sort of a scam here going on with this Job Corps. But we're going to get further into it. Anyhow, the indictment says that the kid was talking about how he wanted to be a martyr. He liked Al-Qaeda, all the usual crazy stuff that you would do. Now, as soon as I saw the Job Corps and imam, it reminded me of that boy Bradley that I had met. I wrote that story a month ago. Just Friday, this whole other story comes up, and it sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? The kid's, all of a sudden he's a Muslim, and now he's going to be a jihadi. He's connected with Job Corps. He's connected with this imam. He's got mental issues, and now the feds are accusing him of wanting to blow stuff up. Well, as the indictment goes, if you believe the indictment, the kid was completely off the wall. He was so deep into it. And like I said about Bradley, he knew about Hitler. He knew about the KKK. This kid knows about the Al-Qaeda. How does this kid know about Al-Qaeda? He went from being a little black kid with some issues in school to being a Muslim to being a jihadi. And that's what I see in this other boy's future. They're going to set him up. You watch. All right, so now
they got thousands of these people, though. I mean, they're training them. They're giving them the information and things to learn about this. They're not just pulling it out of the air.
Yeah, you're right.
They probably have pamphlets and instructions and everything else.
Mhm. All right, now I start looking at Job Corps and infiltration, and first thing I find is their school calendar. And this is the calendar of events for all of Job Corps. Now, Job Corps is a federal. Let me start there. Job Corps is a federal program. They get billions and billions of dollars from the federal government, from the Department of Education, but mostly from the Department of Labor. You all know who's the head of the Department of Labor, right? Thomas Perez. He was with the DOJ. He's the one. He's the one that dropped the case against the New Black Panthers on the voter intimidation. Well, when Hilda Sola left the Department of Labor, Obama moved Perez over there. So now they got this mad infiltration going on. But it's actually been going on since 82. This program started with Lyndon Johnson, but since 82 they've started hiring these Muslims for this infiltration. Now, I'm looking at the calendar of events for 2015. They do have Saturday, July 4th as a day off for Independence Day. Now, July 9th, Ramadan begins. They serve halal meals. They have invocations from interfaith clergy. Now, interfaith clergy are always Muslims. They do preach Christianity and Judaism, but it's a Muslim who is doing the invocations. This imam was giving the invocations at the Kansas State Senate and the swearing-in ceremonies. We're going to get to Bradley's imam, too. Now, they're going to celebrate Ramadan starting July 9th. Let's see here. They have Laleh al-Qadr, Qadr, and that starts Tuesday, July 28th. They also have on the 28th of July starts the Eid al-Fitr, and it says many Muslims in the United States celebrate Eid al-Fitr, known as Eid al-Fitr or Fitr, on the first day of Shawwal in the Islamic calendar. It marks the end of the month-long fast of Ramadan and the start of a feast that lasts up to 3 days in some countries. Now, that Eid al-Fitr, they always have something blow up on those days. That's how they celebrate the end of this fasting, and they usually blow something up. Every year that's happened. But this is Job Corps. This is a federal program that is supposed to be helping at-risk kids, not just Muslims. But not only are they doing this, but they are converting kids. Like I said, Bradley told me, not only he, but others. He was getting his name that day with one other kid. But some of the other kids in his class have already converted, and others were in various stages of conversion. Also, they have decided to join Job Corps with AmeriCorps. I just found this 20 minutes before we went on the show. It says students from AmeriCorps, National Civilian Community Corps, and Job Corps recently teamed up. We had talked about how Eric Holder was taking those unaccompanied minors and recruiting them into AmeriCorps, so I wanted to bring that to your attention. Anyhow, so then I'm looking around and I'm see if I can find more imams and Muslims in this Job Corps. Well, from 1982 to 1984, Mr. Dawood Suleiman Muhammad was an imam, and he was the head of the Job Corps in Shreveport, Louisiana. He died, let's see here, I'm looking at his obituary. He died in 2011 at his home, December 23rd. But it says here that Mr. Muhammad was employed with the Shreveport Job Corps Center, where he held the position of OSA director from 1982 to 84. So this is how far back this goes. It says he was an owner of a landscaping business. He said Majid Al-Taka Foundation, where he held the position of director/imam and teacher from 86 to 99. And he was a lecturer of Islam and comparative religion from 1988 to 92. So he's been with Job Corps for all that time. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's pretty far back. Let me see if I can find something even more recent. So this has been going on, since there's another one from 2001. Sahim Alwan. He's a Yemeni American, and he grew up in the suburbs of Buffalo, New York. In 2002, he was arrested and charged as part of the War on Terror, together with the other members of the Lackawanna Six. Well, he was described as a clean-cut son of a steel worker, and Alwan was noted for always wearing a shirt and tie. In the 1990s, while working for Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, he cooperated with the FBI to help investigate a fraud case. They called him a success story, and here's where I found him. It says he maintained a stable marriage, had 3 children, and worked with the Iroquois Job Corps Center to help employ indigent and troubled youth. Here's another one. This is not a single example. Now, as this goes on, we have a woman named Lenita Jacobs-Simmons, and she's the National Director for the Office of Job Corps under the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training. And as the National Director, she has the responsibility for leading the program and its 125 Job Corps centers throughout the country. Because the Job Corps program serves over 60,000 youth ages 16 to 24. They have access to 60,000 youth. That's one hell of an army, especially if you have imams running the show. There's a lot of Muslims in the directors' positions, in the educational departments, and they have, 125 contractors. Now, I was looking at the Job Corps contractors, and in their little handbook it says here, all 125 of them. I was looking at, how am I going to get information? How am I going to file a FOIA? Well, it says A, request for information. The Job Corps Director shall develop administration procedures to respond to requests for information or records. B, Freedom of Information Act. I can get all the paperwork I want on Job Corps, but you know who I can't get it on? The 125 contractors. Number 2 section, it says contractors. Job Corps contractors are not agencies for Freedom of Information Act purposes. Therefore, their records are not subject to disclosure under the Freedom for Information Act. So, I can't get them. However, I did find a list of the contractors. There's 4 main ones. One is Career Systems Development Corporation. Another one is Management and Training Corporation. The third one is MIN-Act. That's the one we're going to talk about. And the 4th one is ResCare. Out of the 125, those are the top. But each one of them, they don't have to give me any information. Now, it says here that CARE also sponsors Job Corps, and they do diversity training. You know who CARE is, right?
CAIR.
CAIR.
Right?
Yeah. Now, CAIR is a big funder. So is ISNA, Islamic State North America, Islamic Society North America. They're big funders. Plus, they have this magazine called Horizons Magazine. And Horizon Magazine is Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic Center magazine. And I was looking through it. All the links, I'm sure Lynn has all the links. Anyhow, that Islamic magazine has places where you can go for hawala financing. I don't know if anybody out there knows what hawala financing is, but Muslims don't pay interest rates because they call it gambling. They don't pay for insurance either because they call that gambling. So if you are a Muslim and you borrow $100, you give back $100. So the banks don't make any money. So they have what's called hawala financing. And hawala financing doesn't have any records. They don't keep records. So they have this huge money laundering thing going on. And Job Corps has a budget of $1.7 billion. I don't know if you all know that, but they even have a Friends of Job Corps Congressional Caucus, Let me tell you something. If there's $1.7 billion out there, you got about 60 politicians with their fist in the cookie jar. Corrine Brown, Bob Brady, Joaquin Castro, William Lacey, Emmanuel Cleaver, he's in on this. John Conyers, Jim Costa, there's a bunch of them. Lloyd Doggett, Rosa DeLauro, you all know her. She's that real pretty one there. Every one of them. Sheila Jackson Lee, Edie Bernice Johnson, Hank Johnson. They're all friends of Job Corps in the Congressional Caucus. Each one of them is getting a kickback. They're laundering money. There is a Job Corps fraud page you can get to. I Googled it, but on the fraud page it tells stories about how they even serve halal meals, by the way, at Job Corps. It's a residential program. You stay there. And they're saying how, that these kids aren't getting any education. They're lying. They're fudging the numbers. They're fudging the paperwork. They're not getting jobs. Half the time the teachers don't show up. One kid was complaining that he had gone to nurse training, but he couldn't get the clinicals accomplished because they didn't have any agreements with any nursing homes, hospitals, doctor's office, any of that. But they got paid for it. Also, they did the diversity training. Where's the money go? Of the 125 Job Corps centers located in the United States, 77% of them, that's 94, are run just by 4 private companies, I told you, Career Systems Development Corporation, Management and Training Corporation, MinAct, and ResCare. The remaining 28 centers, known as Civilian Conservation Centers, are located on federal lands and are operated by the Agriculture and Interior Department. The largest Job Corps contractor is Management and Training Corporation, which operates 25 centers nationally, including centers in San Bernardino, California, Chicago, Illinois, and Atlanta, Georgia. Those ones are some of the biggest frauds of all. So now, they're taking this money. They got these kids. Also, let's see here. In Maryland, let's get back to Bradley first. I know I'm jumping around. I hope you can keep up with me here. I'm a little ADD. But the one in Maryland, now, the Muslim Brotherhood newspaper in Maryland said that there was the first Muslim appointed to the Maryland's highest court. Governor O'Malley, who's going to be maybe running in the election this year, it was his second term in office, and it had been marked by several other key appointments of Muslims, reflecting his commitment to mirror the diversity of Maryland citizens in his administration. Anyhow, he appointed this Muslim judge. Well, as it turns out, the Muslim judge is Imam Yusuf Salim. Do you know he was with the youth part of the courthouse before he was appointed here? He was the one that was sending the kids to Job Corps. Also
juvenile division.
Juvenile division, yes. Yep. Now, he says, this guy, this Imam Yusuf Salim, he's the Majid of Muhammad in Washington, D.C. He gave the invocation and the swearing-in ceremony for a number of judges. He has been to the White House for the Ramadan iftar dinners. He gave the invocation at the Senate on opening day when they, on one of the times that they were doing the Congress again. He's a part of an Islamic advocacy group. He's a CARE representative, and he's in with the governor, who is aggressively appeasing Muslims. They are infiltrating, and they are taking our children, especially the at-risk kids. And if one of them decides to be a jihadi, well, so what? They'll just say that he was mentally ill or that he had a long criminal record, and that's what he was doing at Job Corps. And this judge put him there. And this judge also is an imam at a lot of schools, and he goes around and gives diversity training to military and inmates. Now, you all remember I worked in a prison. I told everybody that. when they were doing the Muslim ceremonies and the Muslim masses and stuff, whatever you call them, the corrections officers couldn't go in to the room where they were holding their services. They treated it as like you were in a confessional, and that was a priest and inmate thing. So they could talk about whatever they wanted in there. And once a few of the inmates had converted to Islam, and they were getting this special treatment, and they were having these special services and special meals, and special people come in and talk to them, and special rooms, and the corrections officers couldn't go in, everybody wanted to be a part of it. And then I find out at Lackland Air Force Base, they're doing that diversity and interfaith thing, and they're converting at least 2 soldiers a week.
Well, and isn't
that's
that
at
an
Lackland.
Air Base something?
Yes.
Aren't they doing that
Yeah,
at
in San
Force
Antonio.
Base?
Yeah. Lackland Air Force Base. And
so you have the military, you have every branch of government, you have schools, you have prisons, all converting people to Islam.
Yep.
And turning into future terrorists.
Yep. And so now, if you put it all together, you can see how big and how widespread this is, how there's billions and billions of dollars floating around, not just taxpayer money, but there's even more billions in private funding. The Job Corps has ingrained itself with the Department of Labor, the Department of Justice. They're changing, the regulators, like Perez. He was at DOJ, and now he's at the Department of Labor. You got the Department of Education grants involved in here. They just proposed, they want a $77 million raise this year from last year. So they want it to be $1.9 billion, so almost $2 billion, and that's just from the Department of Labor for Job Corps. That's almost $2 billion for 129 centers, and they're doing shoddy work. They had even stopped taking applications because they ran out of money. There is no way they should be running out of money. These kids should be getting elite educations and elite degrees, and they shouldn't be converting these kids to Islam. So now I'm figuring, okay, done with Job Corps for a minute. Let's look around and let's look at our immigration for a second. Do you know 190 cities were selected to import Muslim refugees? They're not calling them illegals anymore, and they're not calling them immigrants anymore. They're calling them refugees. And
those are the ones over and above this, coming over the border from in South America. These are being flown in from everywhere from Iraq to Syria.
100,000 a year. And you know what they're doing is they're putting them all in these cities. What they do is they do like they did with the Job Corps practice. And a contractor will set up in a city, and they'll bring 100,000 immigrants, like the Somalis that they brought to Tennessee and to Massachusetts. They put them in one place because they're seeding communities. We have no-go zones right here in America, in Dearborn. If you saw the thing about the gay bakery and you saw Steve Crowder, go into the bakery and ask to make a gay cake at the Muslim bakery, he was in Dearborn. If you see the video, you see he's riding down the street. There isn't one store that he rode by that doesn't have an Islamic name up in Dearborn. And it's not just Dearborn. They're in Orlando. They're in Fort Lauderdale. They're in Dallas. They are in Springfield, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, Boston, Suffolk County has more immigrants than they do residents now, citizens in Suffolk County. That's Boston.
And they run cities like Detroit in the ground, so they could say, you know what, look at, if you guys move here, we'll give you all this money to rebuild.
They don't want to rebuild Detroit.
They rebuild it as a Muslim community. Oh, they will.
No, they don't want to rebuild Detroit. They want to leave it a crap hole because they're going to let the Muslims do it. They're seeding it. They got them in Dearborn and they got them in Flint. Yeah, and now they're going to leave it up to the Muslims. There's money in it. You know, these refugees, they get food stamps, housing, cash benefits. They get education grants. They get even energy assistance. There's all kinds of benefits to being a non-American now. The only benefit you get to be an American now is you get to pay the note. Other than that, you're screwed. There are no benefits. These people are a protected class. You know, they're even now, because this kid got caught, they're saying, well, we need special protections because, you know, there's an anti-Muslim sentiment around. They got that backwards, honey. There's an anti-American sentiment going on in this country. If you're not a Muslim or an illegal, and in some cases women and minority, but you have to be the right minority. If you're Asian, you're not a minority.
Or black, or Mexican. You know, they're all protected classes except for actual American citizens born here.
Yeah. And they, like you said, they have infiltrated every single department in our government. He has taken down every defense we have against infiltration, including putting Muslims into key positions in the DHS. Now, you all knew about Muhammad Alibiari, right? Well, over the last year and a half, we received more than 100 queries asking us whether it was true that 2 devout Muslims were appointed to serve at the Department of Homeland Security. The short answer is yes, and this is from Snopes, actually. It says, the short answer is yes, though we can't say how devout either man might be. Let me tell you something. You're either a devout Muslim or you're not a Muslim. So just forget that. It says one of the 2 appointees has a long record of working in law enforcement under both Republican and Democrats. So now I had told you about the magazine. The magazine is called Horizons. One of the supporters is Be the Change. That's an Obama group. It was an offshoot of Color of Change and OFA. Well, this Muslim that they appointed to DHS, he's from Be the Change, and he's one of the supporters of the magazine who also supports Job Corps. So they got this incestuous little group going on. All right, this guy was born in Canada. His name is Arif Ali Khan, and he was responsible for derailing the LAPD's plan to monitor activities within the Los Angeles Muslim community. He was appointed as Assistant Secretary for the Office of Policy Development. He's the one that went through all the manuals and said, no, you can't say this, you can't say that, you got to get rid of this and rid of that. He became a professor of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism in 2010. He was born in Canada, raised in California. His parents are Indian and Pakistani. Arif Ali Khan graduated from UC Irvine with a bachelor's degree in social ecology. 3 years later, he received his Juris Doctorate from Loyola Law School. He subsequently served as a professor in the Los Angeles Attorney's Office and taught law at the University of Southern California. Also spent time working for the U.S. Department of Justice in the overseer of its computer hacking and intellectual property programs. They put this guy on the computers. He has access to every single thing that's on a computer in DHS. He was an opponent of George Bush's prosecution on the war of Islamic terrorists. Ali Khan was responsible for, like I said, derailing the LAPD's activities monitoring within the city's Muslim community. Obama's Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano appointed him as Assistant Secretary for DHS Policy Development. Like I said, he says he had 13 days prior to his DHS appointment. Ali Khan, a devout Sunni Muslim, had participated in a Muslim Public Affairs Council fundraiser titled Be the Change to support that organization's leadership development programs. He was also with fundraisers for the Islamic Shura Council, and he was a noteworthy fellow speaker with Ag Saeed, who had previously defended Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Sami al-Arian. Sami al-Arian was praised in that Horizons magazine. I'm telling you, it's an incestuous thing. So now, I just told you, we have these kids, these at-risk kids, you know, generally black kids, although little Bradley boy there, he's not black. He's Indian and Irish. He looks mostly Indian, by the way. He didn't get much of his father's looks. But they're taking these at-risk kids, especially the ones with the mental illness. Now, this imam's riding around with them. He's driving them to school. He's driving them home. He's had plenty of time alone with this kid. He knows his medicines. Little Bradley there, he's a big fan of Imam Youssef. He wouldn't have even heard about Islam if it wasn't for that Imam and Job Corps. Guys, we got a problem. And then just before coming on the air, it says that they've joined up with AmeriCorps. And we have reported on this show that Eric Holder was recruiting those illegals, those unaccompanied minors, into AmeriCorps to give them stability and structure. And they got all kinds of imams, over there. This
it's a total infiltration and invasion, but it's been going on for decades. Decades. Yeah. And when you saw Chris Christie and Michael Bloomberg and Dick Durbin, all these people taking money from Muslims and taking pictures of themselves, in mosques. You have to ask yourself, why? They were such a minority in the country. Why go to all that trouble, go out of your way to appease these people? Well, it's because they knew all along they were bringing them in by the hundreds of thousands.
Not only that, but the people in charge of this country right now are globalists. These Muslims are a minority here, not for long, by the way. They're very close to not being a minority anymore. However, they are not a minority in the rest of the world. There's 8 billion of them. There's twice as many of them as there are Christians. They are no minority. And they've done this to every other country.
We're just pretty much the last country. I mean, Scotland, Sweden, you name it.
Yeah. Actually, we have, if you take the size of England, and you see the Muslim infiltration in England, just England alone, okay, we are, 5-6 times the size of England? We have more Muslims per capita in the United States than England does. If we're 5 times bigger and we have 8 times more, we have more Muslims here. And it's every day. Obama wants to bring in 100,000 more a year of the refugees, plus the ones that are here on visas and the ones that get over the border. I mean, that they're living down in Mexico for 6 months, learning, all the customs and stuff from the Hispanics, and then coming across the border telling everybody that they're Mexicans, and they're not. They even caught one of the biggest jihadis coming across that border in Texas a couple of weeks ago, remember?
No.
We have a problem. And guys, please, pay attention to your kids. Find out who's talking to them. If they're recruiting 2 soldiers a day, a week at Lackland Air Force Base, imagine how many kids there are. How many kids are in Bradley's class? 30? And they're all converting? Some have already converted. Some are in different stages of converting. They're coming after your kids. We've told you on this show about how they've taken kids in Massachusetts to mosques without the parents knowing about them, how they're holding Hajib Day, and how they're stopping movies from being shown on campuses. How many are there? This country is changing, and we're letting it. And it's a sneaky invasion, ladies and gentlemen.
What are you going to do? What do you mean we're letting it? What are we going to do? You tell me.
I haven't got that far. I haven't got that far. But the first step is to tell each other and let everybody know what's going on. I don't know what we're going to do yet. This investigation is ongoing. I'll have more next week on it. I'm going to start looking into the money. What's the show's motto? Always follow the money. So now, just going to visit family, having that land in my lap with little Bradley, and bringing it to everybody's attention. As soon as I saw that other kid, the kid in Kansas, it was like I wrote the blueprint a month before. It's the same thing. The kid had problems. The kid had mental illness. The kid had some violent tendencies. The kid is dropped in the lap of an imam. The kid's converted. So we got to, I don't know, man. We got to pay attention, because if there's one, it might be a fluke. If it's two, that's a pattern.
There's thousands.
Well, there's probably 30 right in Bradley's class.
There's actually no protection or anybody doing anything about it.
Because I don't
Matter
think
of fact,
people are seeing
they're helping them.
Yeah, they're helping them, because Americans are good people, and Americans are like, we love immigrants. Why? There's a caliphate going on in this country. When they told us the flag of Islam will fly over the White House, it probably already is. They probably, we just didn't see it yet.
Well, you got one of their own right at the top. I mean, I'm surprised he hasn't just put one up just because.
And
he can do anything he wants.
Look at our president.
I mean, when you have Congress giving a prayer to Allah, John Boner, I mean, when has that ever happened before?
That guy that was giving the prayer to Allah was Imam Youssef.
No, I mean, John Boner was saying it in Congress, right, in the House, offering a prayer to Allah
gave the invocation
in the House.
And
I'm going,
Kerry,
oh my God.
Kerry, when he was asked about the deal, he said, Allah willing. Inshallah.
Well, they all have to pretend like they're on the winning side now, because they know what's happening. They're behind it. They know exactly what they're doing, and they've been doing it for a very long time, as you found out.
Yeah, well, we're thinking the caliphate is over in the Middle East. Oh, no, dear. The caliphate is in your classroom. The caliphate is at your door.
All over. It's everywhere.
The caliphate's
worldwide,
here.
Global.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is Muslims have to establish a global caliphate in order for their prophet Muhammad to return. Global includes us. Now, it's not just in the Middle East. Look at the UK. Look at Sweden. Look at even Russia, Chechnya.
A third of Russian military is Muslim.
Yeah, it's not over there anymore, folks. It's here. And it's in your classroom. It's in your kids. It's in your kids' classroom.
10 years.
It's not just in Bradley's classroom. It's in your kids' classroom. It's in this Common Core. They have pieces of Common Core that say that Allah is the one true God. That when they're doing world history and the world's greatest religions, they briefly mention Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism, but then they have 10 pages of Islam. They even teach them Islamic prayer in regular public schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you look at the President of the United States. First, he's infiltrated every single agency with Muslims. Every single bit of foreign policy he has done has advanced that caliphate that's going on over there. He overthrew Mubarak, who was a moderate. He was keeping that crap at bay. Same with Libya. He was keeping those jihadis at bay. In Egypt, I mean, he put the Muslim Brotherhood in there, and when the Muslim Brotherhood got thrown out, he went after Egypt. When the Iranians had their attempted revolution, did he help those people? No, he didn't. But now he's helping the Iranian Ayatollah and the mullahs, and they're the ones with the caliphate going on.
Well. He just does what he's told as well. And these people like John Boner and stuff, they're probably being threatened. I mean, everybody's got someone they care about. Everybody's got someone they love. And it's really easy to get people motivated to do whatever you want to do. You either bribe them, you threaten them, or...
Well,
something.
when I was talking to Bradley, he was nice. He was telling me all about the Quran and how beautiful it was and how it means peace and how these jihadis are not true Muslims. And he was talking like it was rainbows and lollipops and daffodils. He didn't mention how they killed gays. I told him about it. And he didn't mention how they oppress women. I told him about that. And he told me that women belong to men. And that's the way it is. He verbatim quoted articles in the Quran. And the way you would have thought he was talking about his girlfriend the way he was talking.
They're not going to tell you the bad stuff that's in there. When they're sucking you in, they're going to tell you all the good points. Hey, how'd you like to have 10 wives? Hey, it sounds pretty good to me. What do I got to do? Nothing. Just beat them once a week, and you'll be good.
Yeah, and that, he says that he has service to the community, and he's doing all these good community works. And I said, what do you do? And he says, I'm teaching Islam. I told him to stay away from my grandchildren.
Can you imagine somebody's trying to teach somebody a Christian prayer in school? The ACLU would be on them, all over them, like hair on Michelle Obama's back. I mean, it'd never happen.
Unreal.
But they can teach Islam and nobody says a word.
Yeah, I just can't imagine how bad this has gotten. So next week I'll have more on this story. But this is just breaking now. This investigation,
this
and
election,
we are digging.
Remember this election. That you really think in a million years, someone like Cruz or Scott Walker or anybody that might reverse some of this is going to get in a position of power? Of course not.
I don't know that.
It's going to be someone that continues business as usual, keeps flooding the country with Muslims, keeps destroying Christianity, the American way of life. I mean, when the White House is installing gender-neutral bathrooms in it, I mean, they're taking away your basic right to privacy. You can't even go to a restaurant now, go to the bathroom because somebody of the opposite sex might be standing next to you. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, it is.
Just destroying the most basic freedoms we have.
Yeah, it is. But I don't know that one person is ever going to be able to undo this. I don't know how we're going to undo a caliphate. We have to do something about this immigration. We're not just. This isn't just about when we're talking about immigration, like I tell everybody, they want you to think of the poor tomato picker and a couple of his little kids coming over the border just looking for a job. Let me tell you, folks, that's the least of our problems. The drug cartels are the least of our problems.
Right.
This is way bigger. These people are here to take us down. A lot of the South Americans and stuff, they really are here for a better life. But they should come here legally. We need to do something about that. But, they're coming over the border. The ones that Obama's flying in, calling them refugees, they were supposed to be bringing in Syrian refugees. 8% of the Syrian refugees, I think there's like 200,000 of them, 8% of them are Christian. The other 92% are Muslim. And they're putting them all in areas, like the same area, like Springfield, Massachusetts, and Dearborn, and Memphis. And they're seeding these communities. And we have no-go zones. And now you're looking at Sharia courts.
They're taking over everything. Even rich neighborhoods in Nebraska. I lived in a very nice apartment complex in a suburb of Omaha. And, you really had to have a pretty good job to live there. Rent was not cheap. And when I moved in there, it was probably 98% white. A few minorities here and there, but they all had jobs and everything. I have no problem with that. I woke up one day, and I thought I woke up in another country because I heard someone speaking a language I didn't understand. And the parking lot where I was at, had like 120 Sudanese people in it. I thought, I'm looking around for a bus. Did a bus break down on the way to the zoo or something? Maybe there was a tour bus taking them to see the sights, Henry Dorley or something. And no, they were all driving brand new SUVs. Nobody had a job. And they took over the entire apartment complex in that little tiny neighborhood. I thought, what the hell is going on? I couldn't believe it.
Now we know.
Right.
This contract is that are hired to bring them.
They go to Christian type areas like Lutheran Church and processing centers like you have on your list, and they get waivers and welfare and everything else, where they can go anywhere in the country and get an apartment anywhere they want.
Yeah, well,
Probably
when they first get here, they put them into a consolidated area, neighborhoods. You know, the government will rent out an entire building complex, or, you know, like a closed down housing projects. They'll refurbish it and they'll put them all in there. But you know what else I've noticed where they're putting them? They're putting them in red states or in red areas in blue states, like Suffolk in Massachusetts. Or, you know, you got Florida, you got Orlando and Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
They're putting a lot of them in there. That's a red state. They're putting them in Texas. They're putting them in New Mexico and
Right.
Arizona. And
they put them
all
in
around the Sun
districts
Belt
where they need the help.
They need
put
the
them
votes,
they'll
too.
put them in dark red districts, and so when there is voting that matters, it will all go blue.
Yeah. You know, I don't want anybody to mistake this investigation as anti-Muslim. No, it isn't. Describing what's going on is not anti-anything. I'm telling you the truth, guys. Every single bit of this information, I made sure I read, and I went through every single link, and I searched. I was up till 2:30 in the morning for the last few nights just putting this investigation together. And I'm only doing half of it now because I'm telling you, your eyes are going to glaze over. But we have a very, very, very big problem, and the South Americans are not that problem. When the administration brings these refugees in here, they are costing the taxpayers not just to get them here, but to support them while they're here, to educate them, to feed them, to clothe them, to house them, to heat their homes, to everything that, you know, involves living. And they're even bringing, now all of these different various Muslim groups all have different languages. Some speak Arabic, some speak Persian, some speak Pashtun.
And
we have to hire. Yeah, that none of them are told to assimilate. As a matter of fact, they told us they're not going to assimilate. We have to assimilate to them.
Now, why?
They tell us that they're above our Constitution. They tell us that their Sharia law is above our Constitution, and our politicians are buying it. You know, they'll do anything for a vote.
Well,
and these people are going to be able to vote, you know.
They pretend they need the votes, but they really don't. But I know what you mean. They got to keep up that illusion of choice, and it gives them a reason to pander and to cave to. And that's what these debates are going to be. These aren't going to be real debates about what's best for this country. It's going to be an ass-kissing contest for illegal aliens and refugees. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, well, everybody's tipping around it, just going around it. Oh, well, we got to do this about the immigrants, and, you know, you all sound like you mean. No, wait a minute. You know, we do have an immigration system. Maybe we could do better, yes. We might be able to allow more in. Maybe, you know, whatever. But you're not going to have any type of progress until you secure that border, you control your immigration, and do it all legally. We can do better. But when they talk about immigration reform, they're acting like we don't even have an immigration policy or we don't have immigration laws. Yeah, we do. We've had immigration laws since the country was founded. You know, so they got people thinking, yeah, well, you know, we got a wide open border. We got to do something about it. The border was never wide open until it got opened. It was allowed to be opened. We could close the border.
You know,
every budget, every single budget that we put out, well, we only had one budget for the longest time when Obama first got here and we were doing continuing resolutions. So in that original budget, there was $7 billion for securing the border. When you do a continuing resolution, they get another $7 billion. That's not a whole new budget. So everybody that got money from the first budget, they get it again. And they got $7 billion every year for 5 years.
Problem is that unless
And we
all
still
the
don't have a
states
fence.
succeed at the same time, nothing is going to change. Okay? There's just no way. Unless all states decide, we're not going to listen to the federal government anymore, we're all going to succeed, take back the country, nothing is going to change.
Yeah, well,
This
you know,
is
then
like
all of a sudden,
snowball.
all of a sudden everybody's making a big deal about immigration. So instead of calling them illegal immigrants now, he calls them refugees. And that gives them a whole new status. Now, you can't deport them. You can deport still because they're illegals. You can deport the little tomato picker and his little kids.
But they're not.
No, but you could. The refugees, you can't.
And even when you ask Ted Cruz about it, what's he do? He wants to, he wants to increase H-1 visas, bring in more legal immigration. Doesn't say we're going to reverse the illegal immigration, send some of them back. No. He wants to bring some more legal immigrants over here.
Yeah,
more legal immigrants, like we need a whole
legal
man.
immigrants are still not refugees. When you're talking about immigrants, the people that are here legally, they're more than welcome. They went through the process. They learned the history. They learned the English. They complied with every requirement. They paid the fees and duties and all of that. They wanted to be Americans. The people that have been here 25 years illegally, obviously they don't want to be Americans, or they would have went through the process.
That's not who they want now. Okay?
There's
they
no
don't
benefit
want
to being an
people
American.
that want to be citizens, and I wouldn't want to be either if I was an illegal alien.
Exactly.
Miss out on that free money? Are you kidding?
Exactly.
Hey, look,
why would you want to be an American?
They know well, when you want less of something, you tax it, and when you want more of something, you tax it less. It's real simple.
Yeah, well, things are really bad.
They even give $5,000 incentives to hire an illegal alien over a American-born citizen. We have no representation. Every politician in D.C. is a snake, or they wouldn't even get past mayor.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way. No, usually I fight with you, Scott. Usually I fight with you about this stuff, but there is no way in hell people that have been in Congress and in the Senate for more than 2 years don't know what's going on, let alone 2 decades. They know exactly what's going on. It's their fault. They did this. Obama couldn't have done this himself. Every bit of this was put in place and ready for him to pick up that mantle and run with it. They've been studying our Constitution, not to honor our Constitution, but to find ways to use it against us, to use that Constitution against itself. Now, like I said, nobody has a problem with legal immigration. But when you have an infiltration, it's an invasion. It's not even an infiltration. We are being invaded. And it's not the tomato pickle we got to worry about. When when they say, "Oh yeah, that means love."
The refugee thing was a law they passed like 20, 30 years ago, and that was just a plan B in case somebody actually stopped the illegal aliens from coming over the border. They thought, well, you know what, if they stop it that way, then we'll just declare them refugees, and, that's plan B. So it was going to happen regardless.
Refugees like those poor people that were trying to jump on the helicopter when we were leaving in Khmer Rouge, those are refugees. War-torn states, those are refugees. South America they don't have to be refugees. They're not at war with anybody. They're not being slaughtered. Why? They have violence in the streets. There's more violence in New Orleans and in Chicago than there is in El Salvador.
You know what?
In half those cities.
It would have been so easy. We could have took over Mexico, got rid of the narco state, reestablished a government in Mexico that wasn't corrupt, and there'd be no refugees because, Canada and Mexico are basically our borders sandwiched in between those two. It's sad other countries might have a reason for that sort of thing, but that's not our problem.
Yeah, well, now we're smuggling children.
We don't have the money. When your kids are starving, you don't invite 12 more to come into your house.
If you're over in Yemen and you have a relative here, they'll send a plane and go get you and bring you here. Same with the South American and the Central American countries. If you're an adult and you have a kid in Honduras, they'll bring the kid here for you. But they tell us we don't have the money to deport people. Well, if we don't have the money to deport people, how do we have the money to import people?
And there's nothing's going to stop it. Nothing. Short of a miracle. And that ain't going to happen. No. If you got money in the bank, if you have some savings, my advice to you is to find some place to run that isn't America, because you ain't going to want to be in this country in 5-10 years.
Yeah, no kidding.
You got a better shot being in Paraguay. You'll still be paying George Bush money if you're in Paraguay. He'll be selling you water. But that's okay. At least you won't have a Gestapo of Muslim hitmen kicking down your door.
Yeah, and then you got the sheriff from Pinal County saying he's got 300,000 illegals come through there. And he arrested a guy 20 times. Got in a chase with him the other night. The guy's been arrested and deported 20 times.
It's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, well, he says if you
don't up somewhere else.
He says if you think the border is secure, you're listening to the crazy people in D.C. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have other news to get to, too. There's a bunch of other news to get to, but I wanted to get at least as much of that investigation out as I could in this part of the show. And next week, we're going to bring you more on this, because there's just way more, and like I said, your eyes would have glazed over had I brought it up today. But just remember, guys, we're being invaded, and it's a government-orchestrated invasion, and they are after your children. And, this isn't a black-white thing, but they're more after those black kids. They're converting them. You look around. Look around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Moretti Underground, the Liberty Report, right here at PRN Radio Network, the exclusive home of the Watchmen of America program. The Watchmen is a pretty good program, too, by the way. You guys, if you don't know who they are, they're some of the most benevolent people I've ever met in my life, and they're a great group of people, great group of patriots. So check them out. All right. You ready, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, while we were on break, I just saw an article go by me that says a newly formed Muslim coalition seeks greater clout in U.S. elections. 10 U.S. Islamic organizations have formed a new umbrella group to serve as representative voice for American Muslims, and one of their first tasks will be to carry out a census of the community. Other focus areas for the new U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, called USCMO, according to speakers at the body's launch in Washington on Wednesday, include enhancing Muslim political engagement and participation in forthcoming elections, civil rights issues, combating Islamophobia, and having an impact on U.S. foreign and domestic policy. So here we go, folks. Got themselves a coalition, and they're getting involved in the elections. We should already know that anyhow. I mean, Keith Ellison, that's another person who's involved with Imam Youssef and Job Corps. Keith Ellison, he's on that Friends of Job Corps crew. But you also know that Nancy Pelosi just appointed Andre Carson to the Congressional Intelligence Committee. He's a devout Muslim, and now he's on the Intelligence Committee. So any bit of intelligence that comes through Congress, he knows about it. Just like the other one, who's in DHS, in charge of computers. anything that comes through DHS by way of a computer, he has access to it. We have been infiltrated big time. Let's talk about this deal with Iran. Now, there is no deal with Iran. There's nothing in writing. Obama's telling us one story, and the Ayatollahs and Zarif are telling us another story, and it's actually pretty bad when I believe the Ayatollah over Obama. I don't think the Ayatollah is lying. I think that they're getting promised everything, and then when it's time to tell the American people how the deal is going, they're telling us a whole other story. And the Ayatollah is saying, oh, wait a minute, that's not what you said. And then the Obama administration says, well, we didn't give you this paper yet. You know, we were laying it on the American people first. But they haven't been negotiating with the American people, so, you know, they're all full of beans. All right, so now Kerry is getting a little bit of pushback from people, and especially Congress. He told everybody to shut up. He said that he's earned the right for the Iran deal to do it without interference from Congress. I don't know if Kerry has ever seen a document called the Constitution, but Congress does have to ratify treaties. Just because you don't call it a treaty, for all rights, rhyme, and reason, it is a treaty. If you have a deal between two sovereign nations, that's a treaty. So you can call it a deal all you want. It's still got to get ratified. But he said no, he's earned the right to deal with Iran without Congress. He said this is a global mandate issued by the United Nations, Kerry said Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation. He said Congress assisted by passing sanctions. So if Congress assisted by passing sanctions, then Congress has to assist in unpassing the sanctions, right? Kerry says the whole purpose of the sanctions was to have a negotiation, which yielded the framework for a long-term agreement to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons last month. It's also important to note that we have 2.5 more months to negotiate, he said. This is not finalized. He said that the State Department didn't want the Iran talks to fall prey to partisan bickering in Washington. He said, we've earned the right to complete this without interference and certainly without partisan politics. So he's telling them, shut up, you're not involved in this. This is a global mandate issued by the United Nations. He used those words. Secretary of State John Kerry described the nuclear agreement with Iran as a global mandate that Congress only assisted in creating. A global mandate. So now he's telling our Congress to shut up. It's got nothing to do with them. This is all about a global mandate in the UN. So he told us back in the 70s he was an internationalist, and he would only like to see the United States military dispensed around the world under the command of the United Nations. That's a verbatim quote from the Harvard Crimson, 1979.
And they are.
He said that. Yeah, he told us.
Well,
you know,
Leon Panetta, was telling Congress that himself. He sat there and listened to him.
All right. Well,
when's
now
the last time anybody's been punished or arrested for violating the Constitution? I mean, that's just a joke.
Yeah. Well, we got to
start
start
violating that.
We got to start getting up now. We can't just sit back anymore. You know, punching on a keyboard isn't a real fight, and we better start
get up and
prepared.
do what?
Get up. I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. I'll write it out, and I'll let everybody know what we're going to do next week. However, now that Kerry's, jerking us around, and he's jerking the world around, and Obama's jerking the world around, Russia and Iran know that. Do you know what just happened? Joel Pollack over at Breitbart said, countdown to Israel attack. Russia lifts the ban on missile sales to Iran. Israel said Russian missile sale to Iran is a direct result of the framework nuclear deal. Russia announced today that it will sell Iran advanced S-300 surface-to-air missiles. The decision, which ends an embargo dating back to 2010, shows that Obama is rapidly losing control of the international consensus on Iran. It also sets Israel a deadline to attack Iran, since Israel has treated the S-300 system as a red line and has attacked Syria several times recently to prevent advanced Russian air defense and anti-ship missile systems from becoming operational. So Russia said, "Yeah, I'm going to send them some S-300s." Those are surface-to-air missiles. So if Israel decided to attack, they better make it soon, because once those missiles are operational, those missiles are going to shoot down the planes.
You know, and people think that Iron Dome does something, and it doesn't. You know, it takes down some of these little pop bottle rockets being shot over. But Syria and Iran have been stockpiling chem weapons for 30 years, legally under the UN, and they could rain down death on them in 5 minutes, and Israel would send out their big, you know, they did the old Samson option, and World War III would be on, and that's what they want. They need to decrease the population with some big numbers, millions and millions of people, and there's only 2 ways you can go about that, and that is nuclear war or a pandemic. That's it.
Yeah, or you can, instead of nuclear war, you get rid of the nuclear operations with bunker busters. You get rid of those missiles with a couple of ordinances, and you don't have to even use nukes. You don't even have to use nukes.
That country is so huge, they have no idea where they are, and they wouldn't do it if they could do it. Okay?
Well,
they don't know where they are. Why do you think the U.S. is coming out with these super bunker busters lately?
Yeah, that was another
thing. Because
they
know
the United States,
there are some so deep underground they couldn't hit them.
Well, they announced that they got these big bunker busters. Yeah, why don't you just tell them where they are, too? Why don't you tell them when you're going to use them? Why tip your hand? Give me a break. This is crazy.
And Iran has to know that the U.S. is only giving them all this extra power and leeway to make them a bigger threat than they have been in the past. It will justify the attack on them.
Russia isn't helping either.
Hey, no, why should they? Why should Russia help? Why should Russia help? Iran's their ally. We sure haven't done them any favors lately.
Well,
I mean, you know, I used to be, you know, USA all the way patriot, but in the last 15 years, we have done more to destroy the planet, taking over countries for nothing than anybody else. Think about if Russia would have done what we've been doing. You know, taking down dictators like Gaddafi and all these other ones, sticking in Muslim Brotherhood people. I mean, think about that. When Reagan was in charge, they were the evil empire. Well, tables have turned. There is no good guys anymore. I wish there was.
True.
That's why there's so many suicides in the military. You know, they join because they wanted to defend America, and it's, you know, red, white, and blue. And they get over there, and they find out they're fighting for the United Nations, NATO, and whatever Muslim country we happen to be our friend this week.
Yeah,
that's depressing to a patriot.
You're right. You know, you asked me what we should do, and I really didn't have the solution. However, Gabby Giffords, her group, Americans for Responsible Solutions.
Oh,
she has an answer to terrorism. She said gun control should work.
Take away our gun. Yeah.
Yep, give up your guns, and that'll stop terrorism.
Think about how evil a government is who wants to disarm its citizens as it's letting in millions of violent foreigners at the same time. Think about that.
Well, they're pushing gun control as a way to fight terrorism. You know, I don't even want to read you the article. You know the headline. The headline is Gabby Giffords' group, Gun Control Will Curb Terrorism. It's from Breitbart. It says, in their ceaseless search for new reasons to push gun control, Gabby Giffords' Gun Control Group, Americans for Responsible Solutions, is now pushing gun control as a way to fight terrorism. All right, guys. I got something to say about this.
And nothing they keep making up a new excuse, and it doesn't matter. You know, owning guns is ingrained in American society. So they're going to have to take them away physically. There's no other way.
Well, it doesn't control criminals or terrorists. It only controls
They don't care.
law-abiding citizens who, ironically, they're not the threat to begin with. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you're not a threat. So why? All right. You know, maybe they should tell us how law-abiding people giving up their guns is going to stop non-law-abiding people from committing acts of terrorism. I mean, criminals don't obey the laws we already have. Are they going to obey a new, shiny law? Come on, get real, folks.
See, they want us to be like Sweden. They want us to be like the UK. They want fires being set in the street and riots. That justifies their budget.
Look at the Charlie Hebdo
the military police.
You know, you got to be squeaky clean and a member of law enforcement or some civil security force to have a gun. But the people that shot up Charlie Hebdo, they had no problem getting a gun.
Or second,
you know, the government wants you to give up your gun, and they want to strip you of your rights. You know, we got to think beyond the latest crime of the day, all right? You know, it's a fraction of the gun crime, which is on the decline, by the way. But a fraction of that is done by legal gun owners. It's like 1/8 of 1%.
So
everybody wants to give up their guns.
Statistics to prove that. So you know it's for another nefarious reason. And we know what it is. All you have to do is look at the DHS manual of who they consider the bad guys, and it's all legal gun owners, patriots, Christians, and all the normal, you know, natural-born American citizens. That's the enemy, and you always have to, you know, in any war, you always have to, number one, identify the enemy, and you have to demonize the enemy. That's where you're getting the people going into Christian bakeries and pizza parlors and showing how terrible they are.
Yeah, terrible. Hey, I know that your eyes roll when I bring up the Blaze, so I'm not going to bring up the Blaze, but a couple of their writers that we know, one of them is Tom Trento. He's got his own radio station, and before he ever wrote a word for the Blaze, we met him. We met him at OPSEC. He's big time involved with the military and the veterans, and, you know, that's how we met him. Well, he has done an investigation because he didn't believe that Grover Norquist was a closet Hoodna Muslim.
And he's a
but he is. Well,
yeah, Grover's a scumbag. I mean, all you got to do is Google his name. You know, he's a co-creator of some Islamic Health Center or whatever. It's probably a front for something else. I mean, that's not a secret.
Through Denise, our colleague, we met Tom Trento. She writes, the Internet's an interesting tool. It is especially fascinating that some crafty people can go backwards in the Internet cache and capture evidence. What say you, Grover, this time? To all the Republicans, to the Democrats, to the Conservative Union, to Congress and the NRA, take notice. To the IRS, to policymakers, to lobby groups, the terrorists among us, due to you. It should be noted that this was during the Clinton administration, too. And then she says a particular hat tip to Glenn Beck, and thank you, sir. Great work, Tom Trento, for his stick-to-itness. Tom writes, newly discovered document exposes Norquist lies. A newly discovered document proves that Grover Norquist, top GOP money man, sponsored an October 23, 2000 anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, and pro-Hezbollah rally in front of the White House in Lafayette Park. The rally was run and led by the Muslim Brotherhood terrorist Abdul Rahman al-Moudi, who pleaded guilty to financing terrorism and conspiracy to assassinate then Saudi Crown Prince Abdullah. Al-Moudi is currently serving a 23-year sentence in federal prison. Al-Moudi, who's co-founder of the Islamic Institute with Grover Norquist, is seen on a video in the October 23rd rally screaming his support for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, both of which are specifically designated foreign terrorist organizations. The newly discovered document found on the Islamic Institute's website, their own website, their weekly Friday brief, demonstrably proves that Norquist's organization was the organizational and contact body for that event, dubbed March and Rally in Washington Against Israeli Aggression. And it states, on October 23, 2000, there will be a march and rally in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. to protest Israel's aggression against the Al-Aqsa Mosque and its escalating use of violence towards the Palestinian people. The march and rally are being organized by the National Task Force for the Crisis in Jerusalem, that's NTFCJ, a coalition of national American Muslim organizations of which the Islamic Institute is part. The march begins at 11 a.m. at Freedom Plaza and will move to Lafayette Park in front of the White House, where the rally will begin at 12 noon. It's highly important that the Muslim community in the U.S. demonstrates a show of solidarity by attending this event. A strong presence will emphasize the call to Americas. Anyhow, this goes on, but it says members of the NTFCI are the American Muslim Council, the American Muslim Alliance, American Muslims for Jerusalem, the Council on American Islamic Relations, that's CARE, the Islamic Circle of North America, the Islamic Institute, that's Norquist, the Islamic Society of North America, that's ISNA, we just did a whole thing about them, the Muslim American Society, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and the Muslim Student Association. So there you go. Grover Norquist is exactly
You're cutting out
what...
pretty bad there, Joanne.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why.
No, I mean, I don't either. Maybe it's just on my end, but I can barely make it out.
Lynn's telling me I'm breaking up, too. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I should switch phones. I got to tell you, though, we are in a world of hurt here. I'm just walking through the room to get the other phone.
Hey, can you switch phones? I can't hear you at all now.
Yeah, I'm going to switch phones. Play a song, Scott.
Okay.
Hey, I'm back. How's that? Is that any better? I like that song. How do I sound now? Scott? Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't hit my mic there.
Oh, okay. I got it open for you.
Computer froze up.
Anyhow, sorry about that.
It's
How's my
much
voice
better now?
All right, cool.
Yeah, I hear you clear as a bell.
All right. Yeah, I see you play my theme song. Nice tune. I like Foreigner.
Yeah.
All right. Back to some news. In North Carolina today, there was a shooting at a university. And I found some interesting information. It was at Wayne Community College, and it was an employee who was killed. And a former student was sought as a person of interest. The story's from WITN. It says, one person is dead following this morning's shooting at Wayne Community College in Goldsboro. Officials held a press conference just before noon. The victim has been identified as Ron Lane. He's a longtime employee of the college. It says the shooter was still on the loose. In the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, Major Tom Effler said they were looking for a person of interest. He said the person's name is Kenneth Stansel. Stansel's in his 20s. He's white. He's about 5'11" tall with a goatee and a tattoo over his left eye. Authorities say the man was carrying a long rifle and wearing a jacket. The cop says that this is not a random situation, but an isolated situation. Now, I saw another story that said that this guy that they're looking for, the kid 20, is the Stansel guy, he's supposedly, I saw his Facebook page. The Facebook page was put up not that long ago. And on the Facebook page, he calls himself White Knight, and, you know, he's got references to the KKK and to the Aryans and Aryan music and stuff. I don't think that that is really a true story. I think that either he set it up to throw us off from his real intention, because this kid isn't really an Aryan. They got people all over the place saying he's a nice kid. You know, he's a Christian. He's not an Aryan. He's never been in trouble. But the dead guy, Ron Lane, he is a teacher there. He's a longtime employee. He's in the print shop. He's also gay. He was living with his gay lover for like 14 years, it said. All of a sudden last year, the gay lover disappears. He's gone. Now nobody can find him. He's disappeared off the planet. On the dead guy, on Ron Lane's Facebook page, he writes to the dead lover, no, the disappeared lover, but he says R.I.P. So he knows that missing lover is dead. And now you got this 20-year-old kid who was also a student. He was in the print shop. He knew this guy. And now he's shot this guy. Now, nobody in any of the classrooms ever heard him talk about being a skinhead or an Aryan or a KKK or a white knight or any of that. So how does a person that goes to school every day, knows all these people? I'm thinking that maybe there was a little hanky-panky going on with the shop teacher and the kid that shot him. And I'm thinking that Facebook page is either to throw us off or a setup. I don't know. But nothing points to this kid being a skinhead and an Aryan except that one Facebook page. So I wanted to bring that up.
Real easy. Those are real easy to create. Get the illusion you're somebody you're not.
Yeah. And I got another story here that's really freaking me out. Child Protective Services picked up 2 kids off the street that were walking home, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. Somebody had called and said that these children were out. It was dark. It was 5 p.m. Of course, it was dark. It was winter. All right, it was 5 o'clock. They were a third of a mile from their house, which isn't very far. You could see a house from this where they were picked up. And the Child Protective Services had been hassling this family because the mother had been part of a group called Free Range Parents. We didn't call them free range anything when we were
free range
kids.
Parents.
Free range, like their goats and cattle.
Like their cattle, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they call them free-range children because they're allowed to walk to school, and they're allowed to go to the store, and they're allowed to take their brothers and sisters to the playground, and they're allowed to play in the yard.
They're independent.
They're saying it's dangerous.
Normal children.
They are saying it's dangerous to let your children out. How about we get rid of the dangerous people and leave the kids alone? Now, the children are 10 and 6. The oldest is a girl. She was minding her little brother. I'm the oldest in my family. I took my brothers and sisters everywhere. I took them on the trains and the buses. We walked to school together. We walked home. When we got home, my mother and father were at work. So I was watching them. I was only 9, 10, 11. That's how old you are when you're minding your brothers and sisters in a big family. Strangers. If there was somebody on the street who needed to be picked up, pick up the stranger that was going to hurt them. So now, the kids are a third of a mile from their home. Child Protective Services shows up and kidnap the kids off the streets. They didn't charge the parents with anything, but now they have an open Child Protective Service case for 5 years. They're going to be monitoring this family. No charges. Nothing was substantiated. Nobody hurt the kids. The kids didn't get hurt. The mother was home. The father was at work. If you looked out the door, you could see the kids. They were a third of a mile away from the house. And Child Protective Services picks them up off the street and kidnaps your kids now?
They get a bonus and an incentive to do that now. They basically are, they can just kidnap your kid, take it, sell it, give it to somebody, whatever they want. They're a government agency. Don't you know that? They're a government official. They're above the law.
Yes, they are above the law. They kidnap children right off the street and take them from their parents and then catch a case on the parents. It doesn't even go to court. They haven't been charged with anything. They haven't been investigating. They were not bad parents. They were not neglectful. They were not abusive. You got people out there putting children in freezers. You might want to worry about those kids. The little kids a third of a mile from their house coming home at 5 o'clock for dinner and get picked up off the street by the Child Protective Services. That's a little Orwellian and totalitarian, don't you think?
The worst child protection story I heard, they took a little kid away from their parents because they found out their mother smoked a little bit of marijuana, gave him to another couple that killed her.
My God. I've heard that before. There was a woman down here. She had 16 children. She had a husband, and the kids are all various ages. They all mind each other. Child Protective took all 16 of the kids. And the day after they took them, because they said that she was only one woman and couldn't mind them all, they took the kids on a recreation field trip to a pool. One of the kids drowned. 2 weeks later, they gave every one of the kids back, except, of course, the dead kid.
Yeah, and can't sue them, nothing.
Yeah, she had 16 kids, and she didn't lose any. They only had her kids 2 days and lost one. All right, I got one more story, and then we got to get out of here. California drought, okay? Godfather Politics says the left-leaning journal, The Economist, even advances the fact that other places have dealt with drought better than California. Israel, for example, has built large desalination. Well, desalination in California is harder because electricity is costly, and thanks to a renewable energy program and green rules making building anything slow, a company called Poseidon will this year complete a $1 billion desalination facility to increase San Diego's water supply by 7%, but only after 6 years of permitting and litigation. Many other desalination projects around the state have stalled or simply been abandoned. The greenies strike again. So now battle lines have been drawn over who gets water. Governor Moonbeam is busy putting restrictions on cities and towns, but left the farming communities virtually alone. Mr. Brown put his foot on urban house pipes while letting farmers carry on merrily wasting water, for which they pay far less than urbanites. Agriculture sucks up about 80% of the state's water, excluding the half that's reserved for environmental uses. And The Economist is not alone in its reporting that 80% of the water in California is used, and some would say abused, by the state agribusiness. On April 3rd, the Washington Post headline read, "Agriculture is 80% of water use in California. Why aren't farmers being forced to cut back?" Well, there's many other headlines of interest, but wait, did you catch that little parenthetical tidbit The Economist tossed out? You mean excluding the half that is reserved for environmental uses? Yes, that little fun fact that no one is discussing. Well, as it turns out, you know those fish up in the upper part of California, that delta smelt? You know how many fish there are that they're protecting? Nine fish. This headline says, California water being used to save 9 fish. And the other 80% of the water, do you know 1/3 of the produce that is sold in this country comes from California? So if the farmers need water, you should probably give it to them. And they're not building any new facilities, and they're letting all kinds of immigrants in there. So the best way to help a drought is to, open the border and let more people in?
Yeah, and don't forget, CEO of Nestle came out and said we shouldn't have easy access to water. And they just happen to have rights to suck some of South California's water out of it and sell it back to California's. And their and their license expired on that, but they're still doing it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of this
You're
is going
absolutely
to China
right.
too, by the way. They're sucking it out and they're selling it to other countries and letting our country go down the drain.
They're selling the water in the Great Lakes to China. Why can't they just send it to California? California can buy it for the same price as China.
Oh, because
China's getting a good deal on it.
That would help the country. Can't have that.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, we got to say goodnight, everybody. But I hope everybody enjoyed our show.
All right.
Say goodnight, Scott.
Good information there, Joanna. Thanks a lot for doing that research.
Oh, thanks. There's a lot more coming, but tonight was opening night. All right, say goodnight, everybody.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have, and I really do hope you enjoy the show. To everybody who's listening and who called in and listened on the phone, and everybody in our chat rooms, thank you so much. A very special thank you to my wonderful colleagues, Lynn, Anna, AstroTurf. I see Ida's in there. I see Red. I see everybody in there. And as always, a special thank you to my great co-host, Scott. Stay tuned to PRN all week at 8 p.m. Eastern for our great lineups and fantastic shows. And on Sundays, 2 to 5, Luca Zanna is on. On that note, good night, America. We love you. Scott, rock us out.